So you're running for what office?
I'm running for the United States Congress
Okay.
as part of the First Congressional District here in the state of Minnesota.
Okay. Now I was reviewing your website, which is stephenwilson.org, and kind of getting acquainted with, what experience you have and sort of what direction you would be taking with that position. If you could tell everybody about your experience, about yourself.
Okay. I grew up in southern Minnesota. I grew up in Houston County, and I spent about 15 years with Land O'Lakes doing business development and job creation. I spent a lot of time working in Fillmore County. Spent a lot of time in Harmony and Preston and Wyckoff and Spring Valley, Rushford, and really have an appreciation for the Fillmore County area. But what's come out of that is a real appreciation of telling the truth and having an appreciation of business development, telling the truth in the area of economics, telling the truth in the area of long-term budgets, and what does that mean for businesses. But now, what does that mean for our nation when we look at our 10-year budget?
Okay, now when you refer to telling the truth, what do you mean by that?
I think that there's never been a time during my lifetime when it's so important for Congress to be able to be positioned to really tell the truth about where we're at with our economy, where we need to go. I think that an example of that would be we probably need to spend a little less time listening to politicians and a little more time listening to economists.
So listening to economists, you think, would be more helpful?
It would be, because they're not being emphasized or influenced by special interest groups. They're not being influenced from the pressure of a major political party in Washington, we hope. They're not being pressured for re-election. They're just going by the numbers. And that is something that I think we can gain a lot from, because hopefully they're very objective in their approach.
How do you mentioned the economy and the direction that we're going. How do you feel about the current state of economy and the direction that we're going?
In terms of the first question, the current state of the economy, I'm very positive that we're going to be able to gain some traction, get the economy moving again in the short run, and that the GDP, the growth of the economy will improve. What I do have a concern about is Congress's ability to agree on the really tough issues that we're going to be faced with in the next couple of years. That's what I have a concern about, and we are facing some tough decisions to be able to put together a successful budget for the next 10 years. So, short run, I'm very optimistic. Longer run, I'm very concerned about Congress's ability to make the tough decisions, and then if they can't, that leaves us in a situation where our nation is at financial risk.
Okay, now you said the next 10 years. Have you been looking ahead the next 10 years to see where you think we're heading, and
Sure.
versus where you'd like to obviously see us end up?
That's a good question. Where are we going in 10 years? Right now we have about $13 trillion of debt as a nation. We're approaching $13 trillion. The budget that's been put forth by President Obama on February 1st of last month states that we're going to double that debt in the next 10 years. So that's where we're going as a nation, from about 13 trillion. The specific number is 25.77 trillion, October 1st of 2020. So that's where we're going. Now, what's been interesting about that, Jason, is that 10 days later, several macroeconomists testified in the Senate Budget Committee, and they said, wait a minute, basically, now I'm paraphrasing, but they said, wait a minute, this amount of debt that we've got in the budget can't happen. We've got to figure out some way to adjust about $5 trillion out of that budget, because this isn't going to work. So that's why we've got some major decisions to make. And I think it also might be important, Jason, to talk about why they felt that that wasn't going to work. to have that much debt. And the reason that they cited is, it's simply one of the main ones I think that most of them agreed upon, was that we no longer would be credible with our creditors with that amount of debt and no plan in place to be able to reduce our deficits. No plan. We couldn't even agree upon a planning committee to come up with a plan. We voted on it in the Senate on January 21st, and we missed it by 7 votes. So that's why President Obama had to come forth and threaten with an executive order a debt commission, which is now being put forth.
Speaking of decisions that you may encounter and be involved in, a situation with the bailout that we've had, financial institutions, auto manufacturers, you know, there's been a lot of them thrown on the table there for discussion, some that have been executed. How do you feel about that, you know, that process and the value of that and the effectiveness?
Well, we could scrutinize and debate whether they've worked, haven't worked. They fall under this blanket of Keynesian macroeconomics. And that has been a 70-year debate here in America, whether Keynesian macroeconomics is good or whether classical macroeconomics is better. Classical macroeconomics states that the only time that you accrue large amounts of debt in America is through wars, because of wars. That's the only time that you really justify major amounts of debt. Keynesian macroeconomics came about during the Depression and said if we stall out as an economy, the private sector is stuck, and so the only way to kind of push that car out of that rut, that economic car out of that rut, is for the government to give it a push and inject some dollars into the economy. So that's kind of the history of that. Now, there is some assumptions that go into that that's different than what you're talking about in the last year. The difference is that in the 30s and 40s, 1930s and 40s, we borrowed money from Americans through the war bonds. We paid interest to Americans, and then we bought American products. Now, we're borrowing the money from the Chinese and other foreign interest. We're paying the interest to the Chinese and other foreign interest, and many times we're buying Chinese products with that money. So whose economy are we really supporting in the end when we borrow money to inject into our economy? We really have to scrutinize whether we're talking about an apples-to-apples comparison. And I'd say we maybe are not with an apples-to-apples comparison of the original Keynesian macroeconomics.
Based on our conversation here, it sounds like, are you, or would you consider yourself an economist?
I don't think that I would qualify as an economist, but I do have 20 years of background in business development, and I really enjoy small business development, and I also really enjoy macroeconomics. And so I did spend a year in Iraq as a U.S. diplomat, and my job over there was to create jobs with the Iraqis. So I do have some background in macroeconomics, but not nearly as much as working with small businesses. I really enjoy both.